What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Space Arena Ground Arena, where we cover Star Wars Unlimited from the ground up into space. BananaCrapshoot, I'm back again with another deck profile today, looking at my favorite deck and probably the deck I've performed with the best in events, Han 1 Command. So I've played this since set 1, and I've been upgrading it and updating it with new sets. So here we are in set 3, and I have it in a really good spot. I think it's really tight and it's performing really well in playtesting. So here's the agenda. We'll go over the overview, talk about the leader, stages of the game with Han, the 5, 6, 7, 8 scenario, Han's toolbox, what do we do with it, what do we do with the sideboard, and possible adjustments. So here's an overview of the deck. Give you a second to look at it, but 3 Greedo, 2 Hotshot Blaster for the reach, 2 Battlefield Marine, 2 Spark of Hope, 2 the new R2, 3 Ezra, 3 Little Falcon, 3 Sundari, 2 Tech, 3 Resupply, 1 Ahsoka, 3 Bright Hope, 1 Kira, 2 Chewie, 1 Syndicate Lackey, 2 Marauder, 2 Recon, 1 Mercenary Company, 2 Big Falcon, 3 U-Wing, 3 Han, 2 Home 1, and 2 Reinforcement Walker. So it does have the ability with Han to go wide or to go tall, depending on the matchup. And with Han's ability, we can get ahead of our opponent faster and get to our boss monsters and get to our 7 or 8 drops way faster than they can, usually 2 turns ahead. So that's the main game plan, is to gain more value than our opponents throughout the game. So turn 1 we can play a 3 drop. We can trade into and defeat and live versus any aggro decks 1 drop most of the time. We can establish board control with our higher quality units, and then ramp with Han ability and other ramp cards to play like Han unit, Home 1, and Reinforcement Walker to close out games. So the leader, everybody knows what he does by this point, I'm pretty sure, but his front side, you put a card from your hand into play as a resource and ready it, and at the start of the next action phase, you defeat a resource you control. So he gives up cards in hand for resource advantage. So he gives up card advantage for resource advantage, and then on 6, he deploys, and then on attack, he has the same ability where you put the card on top of your deck. So on his flip turn, you can go up +2 resources. So a lot of people go from 5 to 7 on the 5 resource turn. The Han ability to 6, deploy, swing, and go up to 7. That allows you to play the Han unit. That allows you to play U-Wing. But the way Han and other decks react to Han, you always got to have a backup plan, because there's lots of things that can ice Han, so that when you deploy, you don't get to get that jump, and then you really lose value if you're all in on that. So I like having the 6 drop Falcon in the resource row. I like having Recon and Mercenary Company, so that there's a backup play. You don't ever want to, and you can go all in, but you got to play smart. And I like having a backup play with Han, so that if he gets iced, my whole turn's not dead. Because a lot of times you're going down to 1 or 2 cards in hand when you're doing that. So you got to play smart. I think Han's a pretty high skill cap deck. Every time I play it in an event, I'm always like mentally exhausted afterwards, and I'm like, I don't know if I can do this, but he is a lot of fun, and the deck's very powerful. So that's the leader. So the first stage of the game, we want to establish the board, and we have some good flexibility because we have really good 3 drops. So a Falcon is really good play turn 1. Sundari and Ezra are also awesome plays turn 1. Other good turn 1 plays are like Greedo plus Marine, or Greedo plus the new R2 unit. I like playing a 3 drop turn 1, or a 1 drop and a 2 drop. If you just play an R2, that's fine. If you just play a Battlefield Marine, that's fine. But most of the time, I like ramping up on turn 1 to play the Falcon, the Sundari Peacekeeper, or Ezra. They're all really good units into aggro and mid-range decks. And Ezra is like the key in my mind. Like playing Ezra turn 1, that just opens up so much for you, because with Han, you're taking cards from your hand and putting them in your resource, so you're losing hands. But Ezra lets you play with that extra card, basically, because you're playing with the top card of your deck when he attacks. So I think Ezra is still an amazing 3 drop unit for Han, especially. And Sundari is really good because it attacks for 3, heals for 2. You can clear aggro units, and then into other mid-range decks you can keep up, and you can heal to keep your base Falcon's really good. It can trade into most things and live turn 1. You can Han up Falcon if you swing into something and clear it. You can swing again early turn 2. And Falcon's also a really good follow-up play if you Han up to Ezra Sundari, and then you can Falcon on turn 2, and then you can swing for 6 damage before your opponent really knows what's happening, and you can get ahead really fast with playing a 3-drop turn 1, or playing Greedo plus Marine or something like that. I like playing Falcons, a really good turn 2 play. Another good turn 2 play that really helps establish space, especially with these Django decks around and these other decks that are trying to go space heavy, is the Bright Hope. On turn 2, we can Han up to 4 resources and play Bright Hope. And that takes 2 hits from Slave 1 to clear. It takes 2 hits from like every space unit to clear except for Xanadu Blood. And Ruthless Raider can swing into it one time with the ping, but most of the time the Bright Hope's going to eat up 2 attacks, and that can really slow down some of these space heavy aggro decks. So these are the units we're looking to play early to establish the board that we can trade in other units and outvalue our opponents. Then we want to get ahead. The Han ability on the leader lets us get ahead. Resupply. Everyone knows resupply is a good way to get ahead. Spark of Hope. I'm down to 2 copies of Spark of Hope because I'm also playing 2 copies of Marauder. So Spark of Hope, you can put a unit that was defeated into play as a resource. And then Marauder, on play, you can take a card in your discard pile and put it into play as a resource if it shares a name with a unit you control. Since we do have 5 Falcons in here, a lot of the time Marauder will target a Falcon, put another Falcon in the resource row, and then the Marauder's 4/5 with ambush is really relevant into a lot of the decks right now. But we're looking to, most of the time, I'm looking to ramp with Resupply or Spark of Hope, sometimes turn 3. So it's a way to get ahead. You can play like an 8-drop really early. After we establish the board, we're looking to get ahead so we can deploy even earlier. Han already can deploy on the same turn as 5 drops. Leaders, just for existing, but with Resupply or Spark or Broader play, we can get in even earlier. And then our top end is really good. U-Wing, Han unit, Home 1 and Reinforcement Walker. These are really good top end cards that U-Wing adds a lot of flexibility and utility to Han. And then the Han unit, Home 1 and Reinforcement Walker, those are our boss monsters we're looking to play. The Han unit's really good at controlling the board, and then Home 1 and Reinforcement Walker kind of close it out, and they also keep us alive. So we're playing other mid-range decks, we can survive their top end and their attack because they're looking to close the game as well. Our opponents just aren't letting us smash into them. Having Home 1 giving everything restore, and the Reinforcement Walker giving us card draw and the potential healing. This is all really relevant. So we have a really good top end, and we can get to it before most decks. So the 5, 6, 7, 8, like I said, most Han decks are looking to go from that 5 to 7 jump on turn 4. And your options there are the U-Wing or Han most of the time. So U-Wing we'll talk about a little bit more as it's our toolbox card. Look at the top 10, take 3 cards with the combined cost of 7 or less. So that can be a Han unit, it can be a 1 and 2 3s, it can be a 3 and 4, it can be a 5 and a 2. There's a lot of flexibility and utility with U-Wing. So U-Wing's a great card, we always want to see it. And then the Han unit is really good because it'll clear most other units, it'll clear most leaders, and then like they can't play anything that has less than 6 health, or it just gets deleted, and Han can just stay there because of his ability. But that's not always the right play. Sometimes the right play is to hold off a turn and go from, once the 6 resource turn, Han ability to 7, deploy, swing, and go to 8. So on the 6 resource turn, when they're playing like a wrecker, right? They could play a wrecker. We're gonna play a Home 1 and pull a 3-drop back. So we can pull an Ezra back. We can pull a Sundari back. We can pull a Falcon back and swing with the Falcon and get a restore 1 and 3 damage. So it's a 4 damage swing off a Home 1 pulling a 3-drop Falcon. So in some matchups, and depending on your hand is, you don't always have to go from 5 to 7. Sometimes the better play is to go from 6 to 8. I know in set 1 I played against Sabine in an event. I think it was a showdown. And I didn't have any 7 drops. I had an 8 drop. I had Home 1. And I was able to stabilize with other units and to keep the board favorable for me. So I didn't do the jump from 5 to 7. I waited a turn, jumped from 6 to 8, and then they could never catch up from that because they're not clearing any of my units. Aggro decks are never clearing your 7 and 8 drop units. So if you can stabilize the board and you got that reinforcement walker on the home one, once you drop that, that's like game over, because the amount of healing you can get and the board control you can gain from those units, they're going to be out of gas, and there's no way they're going to be able to recover. So if you're stabilized around the 5-6 turn, if you don't have the 7 drop, it's okay. We got 4 8 drops in here that we can Han up on the 6 resource turn to go up to 8. And like a reinforcement walker on turn 6 is scary. Nothing's clearing that for a couple turns. So now we talk about the toolbox. This mainly comes off of U-Wing. We have a lot of cards in 1 or 2 ofs that we can really maximize off U-Wing or as backup plans if our Han would get exhausted or defeated before he can attack on his deploy. So I'll talk about some of these cards. So R2, the new R2 is a really good card because it lets us take a card. We can discard a card from a hand, look at the 3 cards from the top of our deck, pick any one, and add it to our hand. So it lets us cycle and fix our hands. Tech's really good. I don't think I need to explain why, but for those that don't know, Tech has Smuggle, and then he gives all your cards in your resource row Smuggle. So he lets us play with more cards that we normally would be able to. Kira is a good utility piece. Look at an opponent's hand, name a card, doesn't have to be a card in the hand, and it costs 3 more while Kira's in play. Chewie is a really good Sentinel unit for 5 resources. His stats are good, and he's going to eat 2 or 3 attacks. He was really good before Boba was suspended. He's still really good because he's going to eat multiple attacks, so he's a decent option on 5. Syndicate Lackeys is pretty good. That'll one-shot most of the leaders that deploy on turns 4 and 5, except for like Django. But like Sabine will get iced, so that's an option to one-shot Sabine on deploy. Reekin's a really good 6-drop, good stats. Becomes a Sentinel to he can protect your Han unit or your Han leader. Mercenary Company is really another good 6-drop that I like as a backup play if Han gets iced, because it has decent stats and the ambush and overwhelm are always relevant. And then Han or Greedo and Battlefield Marine are aggressive cheap units that we can use to fill out that U-Wing curve. So like I said, you can play like a Chewbacca and a Battlefield Marine, Chewbacca and an R2, Syndicate Lackey, like any of these. Your imagination can run wild on these. 7 resources worth of stuff out of 3 cards. So it can be Han unit itself. It can be a Greedo, Battlefield Marine, and a Bright Hope. Like there's Falcon, Bright Hope, Falcon, 2 Battlefield Marines. Like there's lots of options. So the U-Wing is your toolbox, and these 1 or 2 ofs that we have in this deck, most of those cards are cards we're going to play off of U-Wings or as backup plays if Han would get axed on his deploy turn, so that we have other options to play. So what do we do with it? How do you play with it? Normally turn 1, I'm looking to Han ramp to 3 and play a 3-drop unit. And then on turn 2, I either play another 3-drop or I'll Han up to a Bright Hope if it's a space heavy deck, or play that resupply and ramp. And then turn 3, same thing, I'm looking to play a 3 or a 4-drop or maybe ramp up to a 5-drop. Kind of depends on the board at that point, but normally turn 1 I'm looking to ramp Han ramp to a 3-drop, and then turn 2 another 3-drop as a follow-up, or a resupply or Spark of Hope. If I trade and defeat my own unit, we can spark it back in as a resource. So looking to ramp turns 2 or 3 with cards, and turn 1 looking to ramp with Han to get ahead with a better unit. Pros: Han is very good into a lot of matchups. I think he's really good in aggro. He's really good into most mid-range decks. He's really good at keeping ahead of control decks. I've had really good success with him against like Palpatines and Krennics and Kiras. He's performed very well. The cons: he struggles against upgrade heavy decks. So stuff like when Boba was running like Boba's armor, couldn't really deal with it effectively outside of some sideboard cards. Luke with The Jedi lightsaber is a huge problem. The new Anakin decks he struggles with. Han can definitely beat those decks, but they are harder and much tighter than some of the other matchups. I think it's at a really good spot in the meta. I just don't think it's being played much. I know a lot of people are playing the mono Han, which is really good, but I prefer the utility and the ability to heal and grind out those longer matchups with Han Green than what mono Han can do. So I think it's at a really good spot. I just don't think it's really being played much. And we kind of talked about the play patterns already. So talk about some sideboard options. So in the aggro, we're going to take out Spark of Hope because most of the time they're not defeating our units. And we're going to put in Waylay so that we can bounce some units back to hand. In the mid-range, I don't have like an in or out for this slide. What I have is just 4 cards, depending on the matchup, that you could side in. So Bamboozle is our option to deal with upgrade heavy decks. And if we need to tempo another deck, so Bamboozle will let us exhaust the unit and return the upgrade on it to its owner's hand. So this is our answer for Anakin, like against the new Anakin decks. Bamboozle is going to come in. DJ is, I don't have it as main board. I know a lot of people like him main board. I don't really like him main board. I like having him as a sideboard option, and I bring him in against other Han decks, Han 1 and 2. I bring him in against other decks that are looking to ramp. So anything green that is like mid-rangey or more control, I'm going to bring in DJ. Waylay is another one I'm going to bring in to remove units, and then Fennec is a good option to bring in against decks that have big butts or problematic units. Like she can snipe a Han unit, she can snipe a Han leader, she can snipe Anakin leader, she can snipe Jango. So like these are matchups where I would think about bringing Fennec in, because with her on attack ability she can swing up. So where she's really good, we'll talk about in a minute, is against control. But these are 4 options. You can bring it against mid-range decks depending on the matchup. Like I wouldn't always bring DJ in, but if I'm playing another Han, I'm bringing DJ in, and so I can not let him do their game plan. Waylay's good, obviously bouncing units, problematic units back to hand, and Fennec is our sniper. So she's good at swinging up. And with Han's ability, we can build our discard to make sure we get maximum value out of her. And then our sideboard versus control decks, we're bringing in DJ, Spark of Rebellion, and Fennec. And then we're going to take out Sundari, Ahsoka, and Han, because most of the time they're heavy control decks. They're controlling our board, and they're not dealing much damage like early. So Sundari can come out. They're usually not much of a board presence. Ahsoka, we're not going to get value out of her, so she can come out. I mean, the Han unit is still good, but Fennec, her ability to swing up into like Snoke's, like she can snipe a Snoke after Snoke comes into play. Han can't do that because he's only swinging at Snoke for 4. But with Fennec's on attack ability, if she gets 4 damage into Snoke from her on attack ability, she can finish him off with the actual ambush. Or if you got enough cards built up in your discard, you can just straight up snipe Snoke with the on attack abilities. That's why I bring Fennec in against control decks. Anything blue villain that's control-y, Fennec is going to come in because she can swing up into the Snoke and the Dooku, and she can snipe Vaders and stuff. So Fennec is a really good option in control decks. Adjustments, other things you could do with the deck. Clone is an option to clone some of these other problematic units. Choose sides is another one that you could, trade a Greedo for a Vader, or trade a Greedo for an Avenger. So there's definitely a spot for choose sides. Traitorous is another card that should be on the radar, especially with some of these, like the Jango space decks running around right now. Traitorous is a good option to steal some of those units. And then the new Enfys Nest, the 7-drop with Saboteur, that when played it on attack, you can return an enemy non-leader with less power than 5. So you can return a less, because even like 7-drop Vader is like the same stats, 5/7. You can bounce a lot of stuff with the new Enfys, and with Saboteur, she can always go to base. So she's an option I'm playing with. Don't have it slotted in yet because I like the utility of Fennec, and I like what the 7-drop Han does for us in the main deck. So she doesn't quite have a spot yet, but I think she definitely could have a spot if you built the deck a little differently, maybe. So those are the adjustments that I see you could make with this deck moving forward. And then again, looking at an overview of the deck, so you can see the whole thing. Again, we got some reach with the Hotshot Blaster, and then a lot of utility and the ability to go wide or go tall. I think Han's a tough leader to pilot, but I think he's a lot of fun, and he's got a good spot in the meta right now. Another change I could see making that I didn't put in the adjustment slide is putting Akbar back in over Ahsoka. Akbar is really solid utility off of U-Wing because he has the restore and he can deal damage when played. But I usually only ever play Akbar off of U-Wing. Any other time I would see him, he would get resourced. Whereas Ahsoka is a decent stats, and she's also, you can remove upgrades on her, so if someone plays like a perilous position on her, like you can get rid of that. So she has some versatility. The ambush isn't hugely relevant, but the 3-4 stats are, because it is an option on turn 1 that you can ramp up into Ahsoka and have a 3-4 body, which is really good on turn 1. So I like Ahsoka right now because I think she's always relevant and always good, and Akbar is usually only always good off of U-Wing. So that's why I have Ahsoka over Akbar right now, but that's definitely a change I could see making also in the future. So that's it. That's the deck. I hope you guys play it and have a good time with it, and we'll see you in the arenas.